Hi everyone, welcome to today's LexisNexis ReadTech webinar, Drug Label Research Across the Product Lifecycle. Before we get started today, we did want to just quickly review some logistics. So this meeting is being recorded live, therefore all participants will be muted. So if you have a question or any technical difficulties, please just send me a message and we will try to resolve that as soon as possible. And in terms of questions about the content of the webinar, please send those via chat as well, and there will be a Q&A session at the end. Finally, you will be receiving the slides and a link to the video presentation later this week. Okay. So your speakers today will be Saner and Julia Frasch. Gary is our Senior Regulatory Principal of Life Sciences here at ReadTech, and Julia is an Account Manager on our pharma team. Today, Gary and Julia will be discussing the following topics. We're going to take an overview of drug labels. Then they'll get into some unique label research scenarios, including product search, market label evaluation, tracking label version history, finding competitor and reference listed drug updates, and confirming delisting. Then quickly at the end of the presentation before the Q&A, we will talk a little bit about Navigator for drug labels and how that can work to support your drug label research. So with that, Gary, I will hand the presentation off to you and we can jump right in.
Well, thank you very much, Erin. And Julie and I are excited to share this information regarding drug labels and the support that ReadTech offers by way of our Navigator for drug labels. So I think what we'll do is get started. We have a lot of material to cover. Before we get into some of the details, I'd like to just refresh and set the foundation of the discussion today and talk about the submission of labels to the FDA and how those labels are made available to the public. So on the left-hand side, we see the manufacturer responsible for authoring that particular label that we're discussing today and migrating, submitting that particular content to the FDA. Now, we need to talk about two different groups of labels that are sent to the FDA. You can divide it up many different types of individual categories, but for this discussion, let's just talk about approved drugs that are connected to a new drug application or an abbreviated new drug application. If it's a generic or a biologic, it might have a biologic license application connected to it. All those applications are huge documents, actually a collection of documents, a full dossier, and the data is submitted through an electronic common technical document structure. Module 1 has a particular location for labeling. And as you know, if you've been making use of that particular application, the initial labeling is submitted, the draft labeling is submitted, there's some negotiation with the FDA, and then final labeling is eventually resolved and agreed by both the manufacturer and FDA. That particular version of the labeling, the FDA makes available to the public in a database referred to as Drugs at FDA, along with a number of other documents related to that particular application. So the review letters and approval letters and so on, you'll find in Drugs at FDA. The labeling content is made available in a PDF format in that particular database. Now, when you're submitting the data for that particular label, not only are you submitting it in a Word format for negotiation, but you're also submitting it in the SPL, the Structured Product Labeling format, which is the XML file format. And that particular final version, initial and final version, is submitted by way of that ECTD through the Electronic Submission Gateway to the FDA. That particular SPL file then the final version of that is also sent to the Office of the Commissioner for listing purposes. So after the approval, we now have two versions of that label available from the FDA. One is that PDF version that we talked about by way of drugs at FDA. And the listed version of that label is made available at FDA label database. There's also another online database repository, a little bit older than FDA label. For today's discussion, we'll talk only about FDA label, but to be clear, there is a third database that SPL labels are made available from the FDA. Now, the other category, remember all that was in regard to approved drugs. The other major category is those unapproved drugs, specifically the over-the-counter monograph drugs that do not have an evaluation, review, or approval from the FDA. They follow the monograph guidelines and are able to be just listed. So those drug products are listed in the SPL format and then sent to the FDA, and they show up on FDA label. They will not appear inside drugs at FDA. Those are only for approved drugs. Now, we can help you here at ReTech in that submission process and that preparation process. Actually, about a year ago, we started to offer eCTD services, so we're able to assist you in preparing that application and not only putting the labeling content in there and submitting that, but all the other technical documents for each of the modules, 1 through 5, publishing that document and submitting it. So there's a lot of support available from ReTech in regard to the eCTD submission. Today we're focusing in on the labeling, and we do have a particular product, single source for drug products, that allows you to build the labeling content, manage that labeling content online, and in parallel to that, we offer services to prepare that SPL document and submit it through the electronic submission gateway. So moving beyond the FDA, so now that we have this label content either through an approved drug pathway or through the unapproved drug pathway, we have drugs available at the FDA to the public. On a daily basis, the FDA copies those SPL files that are listed over to the National Library of Medicine. And the National Library of Medicine is part of the National Institutes of Health, and that particular National Library of Medicine activity supports a database referred to as DailyMed. And on DailyMed, you'll see roughly, last time I checked, is around 150,000 roughly entries that show the drug labeling that has been submitted to the FDA. Now, not all drugs labels actually make it to DailyMed. There are some that are not there, and for the most part, they do all appear there, but there are some that do not show up. But for the most part, for today's discussion, a copy of that received SPL that the FDA received is now copied over to the DailyMed, and this is made available in the DailyMed format. So there's a couple different public, venues that one could go to, either the FDA drugs at FDA and search for the drug label, find out in a PDF format. You can go to the FDA label website and do some searching and find it there. You can also go to the DailyMed website and do some searching as well. We also want to mention and focus in on this particular webinar, the ReTech Navigator product. So the Navigator for drug labels is an application that we offer online. It's an online database, and it's sourced from the DailyMed. So we do go and pull down all that information that is published on the Daily Med. We curate it. We add various search tools and compare tools, and we'll dive into that. And Julia will help cover some of those capabilities. But we do offer then that particular product to the public. Manufacturers, consultants, legal entities, others are able to subscribe to that Navigator product and make use of that. So before we really get into those details, Aaron, I think you have a poll question lined up to help identify those in the audience. So why don't we go ahead and run that poll at this point?
Yes, thank you, Gary. Well, now that you have explained all of the label databases to the audience, we are curious what label database everyone is currently using. So if you would take just a moment to go ahead and fill out your response. The options that you see here are the FDA label, NLM Daily Med, ReadTech Navigator for drug labels, another tool, or you are not currently doing this type of research. So we'll leave this open for a few seconds here, just to give everyone a chance to register, or I'm sorry, not register, to answer. And okay, it looks like we have most of the responses in, so I'm going to go ahead and close this poll. And I will share the results here. So it looks like we do have an audience that is new to our tool, Navigator for drug labels. So I am excited to share a little bit more about how that can help. But excited to see that we do have a lot of people that are familiar with FDA label as well as NLM Daily Med.
Okay, very good. So I would kind of expect that. Okay.
All right, Gary.
All right, so let's move on then to some additional details. Those that are connected to drug development are familiar with these various steps along the way where from initial discovery on the left through preclinical development and clinical, where the concept is verified to be safe and effective. You run a lot of clinical trials and generate huge amount of data actually. And then you prepare the application. It goes into regulatory approval. You enter a distribution that may be many years actually. And there's some surveillance activities that would occur during distribution. And then eventually there's an end of life for this drug product and it's pulled off the market. So there's various touch points along here that one needs to be aware of the research and data that's available through Navigator for drug labels. And there's various points that help you in this particular process. So we're going to pick a couple scenarios where we would find along this particular pathway that evaluation of labels that are on the market, confirmation that your labels have been approved or published, and how you can use the particular information from the FDA and also from Navigator for drug labels from ReadTech in assisting you along this pathway. And as we have these scenarios, we'll take a look at three parts. One, establishing the particular scenario, the problem statement, if you will, and then looking at what the FDA offers, and then looking at how the Navigator for drug labels also works and is able to assist you. So this first scenario would be for that particular situation, starting very early at the concept phase, early discovery of establishing a particular target of what you want to put together and offer to the public and offer to the market. In this particular stage, there's a lot of research that needs to be done. You obviously want to identify the state of the art of those products that are on the market, identify and you might want to do some searches by an indication or a pharmacological class. You also want to, at this point, identify any competitors that might already be out there that are offering this particular solution in this drug product. It'd be interesting to know what their products are, what their packaging schemes are, even going and getting some details about the actual formulation. You know, what are the active and inactive ingredients, the dosage form, and how is it supplied, and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of research that you can put together to find what eventually would be your competitors if you were to market a particular drug in this particular area. Now, this might also show that there's a gap, and you might now have a novel drug, you know, first on the market sort of thing, and you know, that'd be wonderful. Certainly, where you'd be able to market this product without you know, the heavy competition that's already in place. But in either case, this is an area early on where you want to identify what is in the marketplace. Now, if we look at the FDA databases, and let's talk about the first two there, the FDA label and the National Library of Medicine Daily Med label, you are able to do some full text searches. There's some additional information that you would get in FDA label, like MedDRA term searches. Daily Med has RX norm type of values. So there's some additional related attributes and values from these particular databases. And they do provide a listing of these particular products, and you're able to see the currently approved and listed versions. Now, for the third segment, remember we talked about the problem, what the FDA has to offer, and then what the ReTech Navigator offers. So Julia, I'm going to ask you to jump in here and talk about the Navigator for drug labels solution and how it helps one do various search for products.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Gary. That was a wonderful synopsis of kind of the initial drug labeling process. So basically,
you know what?
just this
I'm
slide.
sorry.
Yeah.
I'm going to interrupt just for a second. I realized I added a couple of screenshots before we go into the Navigator. Just let me quickly cover. On the left is that FDA label tool where you can do the searches. In the center, Daily Med. Now this happens to be an area where you can go in and do advanced search, regular search and advanced search. And the National Drug Code, I didn't speak to that as of yet, but the National Drug Code is also a place that provides from the FDA a listing of all the NDC codes that are currently assigned. So now, sorry, Julia, can you go ahead and do the Navigator?
Absolutely. So as Gary mentioned, there are, tools across industry that allow different organizations to complete drug label research. However, Navigator for drug labels provides a little bit more support in terms of what you're searching for and the context of that. So, in different situations, it may provide that time saving that is really necessary when you're developing a drug product or even editing a current drug product, saving that time to find a needle in a haystack. That's kind of how it feels sometimes, going through Daily Med and not knowing exactly what you're searching for. So Navigator allows our customers to kind of get a little more granular with their searches. So they can start big or they can go small. But the first and one of the biggest capabilities, and you could go to that next slide, is there are a handful of different options to search within Navigator. So just outside of, what you might be able to search for with an FDA tool, Navigator is going to allow you to really pinpoint those searches. So, there's a drug name search. So if you know the name of your product and you're looking for all of those products there, you can go in with a drug name search. And then from there, it gets a little bit more detailed. So say you don't know the name of the product, but there is a specific section in the indications and usages that is really interesting to you, and you want to see across all drug labels, what is, say, for example, headaches in the, indications and usages. And typically, if you were to search that with, maybe FDA label or one of the other free tools, you're going to get an extremely lengthy list of drug labels, because that is not particularly that detailed, and it's, just enough information to generate a lot of different results. So what Navigator then allows you to also do is, get a little more detailed upon that. So say I need headaches, but there's also additional text that I want to insert in there. You can build upon your text search. And then there's, also, and yep, that's exactly what Gary is struggling right now. And then there's additional search capabilities that we, will go more into detail later. But, when you're first doing kind of that initial research and trying to see what's out there in the market, or what organizations have a product that will be similar to maybe yours, or what those drug listings look like, the indication search is a really, really wonderful place to start. And of course, you can also do any other sections in the, in the content of labeling. So it doesn't have to just be indications and usages. It can be adverse events. It can be a lot of different items that may assist in, initial drug label research, and then of course, label research across the, the life cycle of your product. One other additional item is that the Navigator does have 27 years of the physician's desk reference, the PDR book archives. So if you are looking to go historical and seeing what was, kind of those original drug listings, all of that information is also in Navigator for drug labels, so that you have access to a lot of historical information if you are looking to see what, what was happening in the past, say for acetaminophen or one of those drugs that has been around for a handful of time. This is going to allow you to also look through all of those labels. And I'll pass it back to Karen. Oh, and then this is actually one of those additional search capabilities. So ingredient search. So say, there's a specific ingredient, much like searching through the indications and usages. You can actually go through and type in that specific ingredient. And from there, it'll generate that list for you. And then, say you need another ingredient, so you can put both of those in there, and then you'll get an even shorter list of results. There's a lot of options within Navigator that allows you to really pinpoint your search the first time around. So you're not, going through page one, that leads you to the next page, and then that leads you to another page, and everything's, maybe a little bit all over the place. This will allow you to search specific ingredients, specific text phrases. It really allows you to have the results you want, the first time around. So, as you can kind of see in these images, I know they're probably a little bit small for the writing, but it's kind of searching for an ingredient that you are knowledgeable on, and you don't know terribly too much about what else is going on there, but that's something that's really key in your product and the products that you're, looking to see if there's any others in the market that are using the same ingredient in the same way you are. So really giving you that ahead and to see, ingredients. And of course, it does expand upon ingredients as well. Like I said, for, the indications and usages, you can really expand upon your search. So if I search for headaches and indications and usages, and then I can even expand upon that and add an ingredient. So now I have those drugs that do have headaches in the, in the indications and usages, but I also am able to search for that active ingredient that's maybe really frequently used in medicine that's utilized to, maybe prescribe or over the counter for headaches. So you're able to really granularize your searches so that you're not wasting time and, maybe getting results that aren't meaningful.
All right, very good. I think that brings us to the next scenario. This next scenario has to do with evaluating the labels that are already on the market, and it would be a situation where you work your way through the initial target. Now you're in development and you're to the point where you need to start authoring that label. this point, the ability to look at some of the labels that are already marketed and out there is a good reference. Obviously, it's not your particular label, but if it's in the same class or if it's similar, you're able to identify a baseline or a common label approach for their particular product. Maybe it's, again, in the same pharmacological class, but you also want to look at some of the competitor activities, what their claims are, and identify anything that's noteworthy or unique about their particular product that would perhaps stand out or make their particular drug product more appealing and effective. It helps guide you along the way. So it's good to know the competition, and as you develop product, you can decide either to go head-to-head against that or try to leapfrog it, or get some type of approach to meeting that competition. Now, the other thing that's very important, if this is a generic drug that you're rolling out, you want to be able to identify the reference listed drug. So this will be the drug that the labeling needs to follow. Obviously, your NDC number and branding will change, but you need to duplicate that particular labeling that's available, and identify that as far as what the patient information is, some of the metadata regarding that, just looking at the even the images and so on that are presented. You'll have to take the content and match the content, obviously make those particular changes that are unique for your particular product as far as branding goes. But the generic drugs does need to follow the reference listed drug content. The FDA does make available the FDA label database, and also Drugs at FDA would be a good source for those generic drug products, and also Daily Med. So you're able to do those searches very much like what we just saw earlier with those three views of FDA label and Daily Med. You're able to do similar types of searches and get information about those products that are already on the market. And in this particular case, let's make a note about Drugs at FDA. This would be the latest approved label for your reference listed drug. But there is a little twist here. That particular product, remember, is available in the PDF format. Unfortunately, it's not available in SPL XML. So that is a little bit of a shortcoming. Julia, let's move over to Navigator and see the types of capabilities that Navigator has when a company wants to evaluate the products that are already on the market.
Absolutely. So, kind of going into what I was, saying about being able to compare labels. Well, I haven't fully gotten into that label comparison yet, but Navigator will allow you to do that full text search that I was speaking of and really expand upon that. So many different sections. But the one thing in terms of, our reference listed drugs is that, the Navigator has an option for you to totally only look at RLD products. So, if you need a list of only those generics that you're working to base you're making that generic and you're looking for that baseline to base it on, you won't ever have to dig through and confirm if a product is the RLD, because there's just a little switch on Navigator that allows you to view any of those reference listed drugs without having everything else in between. The other thing that Navigator allows us to do is a side-by-side label comparison of up to 25 labels. So really allowing you to put in, and this is actually selecting, just 2 labels to compare, but as you can see where all of those highlighted, there's check marks as well as they're all highlighted. You can actually put up to 25 labels into Navigator and to have them be compared side by side. So much like this is what it would look like, except for you're also able to have the changes highlighted. So things that are added in one but removed in the other, or any of those differences will be really clearly communicated through Navigator. And then additionally, on top of that, it also allows you to export the labels. When you also generate them, you can scroll through them synchronously. So if I wanted to look at all 2 together or 3 together, you can scroll through them all together. You're also able to export them all. So if you're, wanting to provide your research to a colleague, just work on it outside of Navigator and really have that interaction with your side-by-side comparison, that is also an option here. So you really can, get nitty-gritty on your searches. And then also a really amazing thing is that you can save those searches. So there is an option to get notifications. And I think we talk about this a little more in detail later, but there is an option for you to receive, email notifications basically saying, hey, something changed with this drug product. And again, I think we talk about this a little bit more in detail later, but a really amazing feature is that it does allow you to take 2 XML files and compare them side by side and then generate an exported report on all of that information. So again, you're saving time and you have a lot more visibility into the information that matters. And again, you can just look at those RLD drugs with just the little hit of a button and you'll only be presented with RLD drugs. So it is an extremely helpful little button, and that's all it takes. And then you're able to look at that list of those drugs.
Yeah, Julia, I think this is a really valuable feature, being able to see side by side and see what the differences are, and work your way down through the changes. This is different, that's different, and then being able to export it and run it label with a saved query. That's all, I think, very powerful capability that Navigator offers.
And I think we cover this a little more in detail later, but it also gives you the option of version history. So looking historically at versions, not even just at, say, like the PDR book archives, which are historical information, you're able to get even more detailed and look at the version history of a certain product. So I know that's quite helpful, and I don't believe that is a feature that they have on the FDA's free tool.
Right. So that's a good segue into our next scenario. The next scenario happens to be this ability to track label versions. So now the scenario is that you focus in on a particular label and you want to see how that particular label has changed over the course of time. And there are various reasons to understand and identify the label version at a point in time. So there might actually be multiple changes under review by the FDA. You might have a couple amendments to the label, changes where the FDA is reviewing it for a particular section. Another change is underway, and then lo and behold, there might be a CBE 0 that comes along, or the FDA needs to make a warning change and have it implemented right away. So that gets pushed in front of all the other changes. So in reality, many of these changes are on the table simultaneously, and keeping track of what actually gets published at a point in time, and then understanding the next change that gets approved needs to be applied to the most recent published change, so that you have a clean evolutionary history of the particular changes. Now, that can be a little bit problematic, but being able to pick that version out and identify it is very important. Keeping track of that, we're actually able to help you do that in the preparation phase of ECTD and so on. But the value is understanding what has changed over the course of time, and there's some implications not only for regulatory purposes, but there could be some legal implications here, where you might have to indicate in a court setting that this particular text, this wording, was publicly available at this point in time, and if the case is centered on that particular time frame, what was available to the patient or the healthcare provider and that sort of thing. So being able to go back and track versions is very important. The other thing that comes into play, and it's kind of a side topic, and it becomes more important for the contract manufacturer organizations, the CMOs, and the private label distributors, the PLDs, is being able to keep track of the National Drug Code, the NDC, that has been assigned. So in some cases, there are multiple parties involved, and understanding which NDC has been already consumed and published. The FDA does have a way to reserve an NDC particular number, but then it lapses after a period of time. But anyway, keeping track of the NDC is another side scenario that comes into play. Not only the version history of the actual label itself, but also what has been consumed as far as your NDC assignment goes. FDA label and drugs at FDA would be good sources for this particular item. The Daily Med also does have version control or versions available. It's a couple clicks that to get there, so it's not like super convenient, but you're able to go to the Daily Med and also find various versions. You can do the drug name search and so on, but you might find it's a little bit difficult, not real apparent to find the particular evolutionary history on some of the FDA databases. That brings us over to Navigator. Julia, please fill us in here on the ability to find drugs, find the label history, and develop this version control over the course of time.
Absolutely. So, as I was kind of speaking about before, it allows you to not only save certain files to receive alerts, but full searches. So, once you get that drug name search down and you have it accustomed to the point where you want it, you can save that entire search, or you can save specific drug labels and receive notifications. So this is kind of the difference in terms of, Daily Med's version history and, what is going to be an option with Navigator. Is you're able to, once you save those searches, it will provide an update, an email update notification to let you know, hey, this has had changes. So once that happens, you're able to then, this is exactly what I was just kind of speaking to, is saving those labels. So with just a check mark, you're able to actually save all of your certain drug labels to your personal library where they live. And then from there, once those labels are saved, they're all going to exist here in your library. And that My Label track will notify you of any updates to the product. So you don't have to go into Daily Med every time and think, okay, let me see if anything's been updated. It looks like the version number has gone up, so let me see the two differences. You wouldn't have to do really any of that footwork because Navigator for drug labels will take care of that. So they will send you a notification, and then you can just upload the search that's already been done and just go right ahead and compare those labels side by side. And what Navigator will then also do is, of course, highlight the sections that have been updated or changed. So again, you can look through separate versions. So maybe you're looking at the same product and you want to compare the past version to the newest version, or if there's really similarities between your drug label and, say, a competitor's and you want to see the differences there. But again, you're able to compare and contrast through the different versions. So as you can kind of see here, this has highlighted in red what is deleted, and then of course in green would be anything that was inserted. But you can go from version to version and see those differences without having to do, read through the entire USPI or read through all of that drug listing metadata. And so you're spending a lot less time finding the section that is different. And maybe it is an extremely minute difference where they had to update spacing or something like that. So it's not terribly important, but it's good to know those differences between versions. Or say somebody leaves your company and there's a gap in time with SPL where you're not sure what the differences are between the past version and the most recent, or maybe the first version and the most recent. You can utilize Navigator to really compare and contrast and kind of fill those gaps of what maybe I am missing, or the differences between them all. And it could be really small differences, or maybe you'll see a lot of differences. But instead of spending the time to, go back and forth, between pages, you're able to just have everything right in front of you. And of course, if you wanted to export it as well. But there is very cohesive version control. And it also, again, it allows you to save those labels and be alerted if anything was to be updated.
All right, very good. So I think we've worked our way through 3 different scenarios. The fourth scenario that we'd like to take a look at is keeping an eye on the competitor changes to the drug labels, or in the event that you're a generic drug manufacturer, you need to keep an eye on that reference listed drug. And I think we might have alluded to this, but this is the scenario where you need to monitor any changes to a particular label. So this would be in the post-market phase of your particular product, and there may be a change to a particular section. It might be indications, it might be how supplied, boxed warnings obviously get a lot of attention, dosage forms and so on. So it'd be very valuable to understand what your competitor is doing. Maybe they brought the product out as a solution, and now it's a different dosage form, and now it's also available in a pill form. So all really good information to understand and keep an eye on, obviously. And then, again, those generic drugs need to follow and match the reference listed drug updates. So there's, again, going back to the FDA's tools, FDA's label's able to do this, and you're able to search for changes there. DailyMed is also available. The FDA is able to supply updates for a particular drug label under the DailyMed. You can focus in on a particular drug. Other than that, the FDA does have a tool where you can get general updates in regarding to particular labels that have drug safety related changes, but that would not include all changes. So there is some gaps here from the FDA. DailyMed does have a couple tools for individual products, but I believe Navigator handles this particular scenario much better, where you can build a list and put those watches in place that Julia had talked about before. So do you want to talk a little bit more about, that search and the library label tracks for this particular scenario?
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely spoke to it last time, so I'm sure I won't have too much, but basically you're able to, again, save specific, not only just the specific drug labels, you're able to save entire searches. So, if you spend a lot of time making sure you have a really cohesive list and a good search down, maybe it's a specific section of the SPL, as we mentioned before, adverse events, indications, usages, but you have a really good search that's very meaningful for your research. You're able to save that search specifically and then go into your library and upload the same search whenever you want. So you don't have to continually do the same search over and over. You can simply upload, just hit search again, and that search will go through. And kind of as we spoke before about the label track, where that arrow is and where it's circled is a section where you're kind of able to select the labels, save them, and then, and actually this one has that section where it says show only RLD labels. So that button that I had mentioned earlier in the webinar, that is, what's going to really narrow down that list. As you can see, I think it was a little bit lengthier in that first screenshot behind, and it really just resulted in the one drug label. So if there is that one label, you can save that one label, and then any updates happen, as mentioned, you'll receive that notification and you'll be able to go in and see what's different. So, maybe it's not you comparing your label to your own label from versions, but the same comparison can kind of happen with your competitors. So if there's a product that is really similar to yours, or maybe you're working on a product that's extremely similar to another organization's, whatever may that be happening, this will allow you to monitor that, or maybe you're working head in head with a competitor, just monitoring any changes, updates, and that RLD label to make sure there's no updates there either. Or if there is, you'll get an email notification that basically puts all of that information. Well, you'll have to get into Navigator, but you'll receive an email no matter what that basically is letting you know that there has been updates. So you won't miss a beat. So even if it's, you're comparing apples to apples or apples to oranges, Navigator is going to allow you to do that in the easiest way possible.
Yeah, Julia, I really like this monitor capability where you keep an eye on a targeted drug, or you can have multiple drugs that you want to keep an eye on, and it can be quite lengthy. Might be a class of drugs, or obviously your generic. You definitely want to follow the reference listed drug. You can also monitor the other generics out there and see, the particular changes that they have made, and see how well they're keeping up with the reference listed drug content.
Mm-hmm.
Well, all right, so that brings us on to the fifth scenario. So we've worked our way through the whole life cycle of this particular product, the various phases from concept through development, keeping an eye on the market, the post-surveillance, and now let's say we're to the point where we need to no longer market this drug, and it's the end of commercial distribution, and we do need to delist the product. So in this particular scenario, there is a regulation that requires the particular final step to be completed, where the drug is delisted. Now, you might be tempted to stop the certification at the end of the year. Remember, every year you either have to make an update to the drug listing or provide a certification that there's been no change. And if you don't do that, one or the other, January 1, that particular drug product becomes expired. And the FDA indicates that expired is not the way, that's the lazy way of trying to delist, but it's not the correct way. The FDA does not endorse that at all. So don't think that because you stop certifying your product that you've completed the delisting activity. Delisting is actually an update to the labeling content, and the metadata will have a update to the commercial end date value. So this is actually a submission to the FDA where you do, in fact, put that end date in place. DailyMed is a place where you can verify that. The FDA NDC directory will also give you some information about that particular NDC code is now expired or inactive. So you definitely want to go to the inactive activity and have it delisted. You can do various searches. There's some advanced searches on the NDC directory as well. But once that marketing end date has been submitted and been published, now this particular label will become archived. And you definitely want to confirm that's true on your particular product. And if you're monitoring a competitor product and now all of a sudden it goes off market, that obviously changes, your strategy, because now that's one less competitor to address. But there are some ways to do this checks and evaluation with Navigator. Julia, let's take this final scenario and talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So within Navigator, the NDC code search will provide all active and delisted or expired listings. So you're able to, say, type in a labeler code, and you will see the list of NDCs pop up. So it's a good option to see, did they put in that marketing end date? Because if they did, it's going to not be in that initial list. It'll be, elsewhere. So the one thing is here is it's a really good way to check that it was properly delisted. So a lot of the times you'll see on, say, Daily Med or elsewhere that the NDC has been inactivated, which is what Gary mentioned, where, they just let the drug listing expire. There wasn't efforts to edit to include that marketing end date. And if a client is or somebody is updating their drug listing to include a marketing end date, you'll see that update happen. Of course, it will be archived after that, but, historically, you're able to look through that in Navigator. And additionally, what this is kind of showing is you're able to save, Excel, export anything that is active and does exist. And then also looking through that list of NDC codes, you can kind of compare and contrast. Like, say we delisted that top one where that's the product code is 0249-1, and it's still showing up. It's a good rule of thumb to say, okay, that was not properly delisted, so let's go ahead and do that. Or it looks like maybe our competitor didn't do that. Another thing that is really useful with this same package code search is that, or full NDC search, is you're able to see what NDC codes have been utilized already. So even if this is a new product, not even going past the delisting, if you're working with a new product and you already have used a handful of NDCs and you're wondering which ones we've used, we haven't used, what's the best one to use here, you can also just fully look up a list of NDCs like the one that's kind of in front of you here. As you can see, they just searched by that labeler code. So you can generate a full list NDCs that are associated with your organization or, customers, if you're a CMO, one of your PLDs, whatever, you're looking for, this is also able to provide that full list of NDCs. You kind of can see, what's being delisted, what's not, and what NDC codes are actively being used.
Well, that is super. I think that brings us to the end of the different scenarios. Let's do a quick recap here. Julie, do you want to touch on what we talked about initially as this various stages that a drug goes through, and as you bring it to market and distribute it for the course of time and then through the end of life, there's various points that we talked about. Maybe you can highlight those particular areas as kind of a summary here.
Yeah, absolutely. So Navigator can kind of, as we explained, be seen throughout the life cycle of your product, starting off with that concept and discovery, where Navigator can really help with your regulatory strategy support. So that initial research, finding different items in the market, what is generally happening across the market, that really preliminary research. Navigator for drug labels can assist in making that a little more streamlined, easier. And then, of course, those searches that you're doing in the beginning can follow you throughout, the life cycle of the product. So that goes into the preclinical development, as you develop, the product clinically and everything as you get your approval. that also can be really assisting in this. So supporting that competitive evaluation that we spoke about, looking at version control, so that first version that maybe existed, or the RLD label that existed, or just products in the market that are being utilized for the same cause that yours is. So really being able to work for that regulatory affairs and figuring out what's going to be the best approach with marketing your product. And then additionally, until the end of the product's life cycle, through distribution and the end of life, like we just spoke about, delisting and confirming that that has happened properly, and making sure you're not on that we call it the naughty list, but the list of organizations who are just let their products expire, confirming that information. And then additionally, through with your competitors, comparing labels side by side, and collecting that information and having a repository for it all to live with my library. So end to end, a solution for researching drug labels.
I think that's a really great summary. Thank you, Julia. I believe we have some time to do some quick polls here, Aaron. Why don't you roll out these last two polls back to back, and then I think that'll be it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gary and Julia. So this is just a quick little poll. I will only leave this open for a few seconds. Just wanted to see if after the webinar you would be interested in a demo or a free trial of our Navigator for drug labels tool. So we're going to leave this open for just a few more seconds, give everyone a chance to answer. Okay, so I am going to go ahead and close this poll, and we're going to skip right to the next one. Oh, and Gary, possibly while we have this poll open, you can give a quick synopsis of the CARES Act reporting requirements that we're coming up on. I know that, Navigator for drug labels can be really helpful in kind of assessing the drugs that you currently have on the market.
Yeah, this is a very timely topic, Aaron. The CARES Act established a report for reporting drug amounts to the FDA. It had a couple delays on the initial timelines. The timeline that is now in effect is really very close, just the end of this month, so within a week sort of thing. And we can help you prepare that data content and submit it to the FDA. There's a next-gen portal that has some information on that. We actually submit the data in that particular venue. But in some cases, you might be needing a little bit of assistance. It's brand new. There's some requirements for previous year's data. We can help you put that together. And then the data, the volumes that you produced last year are now due July 31st of this year. So it's very timely. We can help you prepare that data and submit it, and make sure that you're in compliance. So I believe, Aaron, you had put some other mailings together, and this audience might have probably already received that, but this is just a reminder. Time is up. It's now due. Yeah. So the CARES Act has now rolled around to the point where no more delays, but it's now due, and we're here to help.
Awesome. Thank you, Gary. So I am going to go ahead and close this poll. As Gary mentioned, we do have some great blogs up about the CARES Act reporting. Hopefully you subscribe to our mailing list, in which case you would have gotten our newsletter yesterday that has some information as well. If not, you can subscribe right on our homepage as well. And with that, Julia, I will hand it back to you to wrap this up.
Wonderful. Thank you, Erin. And this last slide is just basically covering, that we do have a lot of different options expanded upon, just Navigator for drug labels. That's simply, the tip of the iceberg of what ReadTech can do to help. We're really here to provide an end-to-end solution in terms of, structured product labeling, drug label data, ECTD, as Gary mentioned in the beginning of the call, any regulatory support, so consulting, really anything under the sun, we're here to help. We would love to be an extension, of your regulatory team, may it be with structured product labeling or if it's, Navigator for drug labels. Across the board, there is a lot of different options, and, if you are interested in discussing more, we would be more than happy to have, additional calls and reviews, especially, for Navigator. If you would like a demo, we'd be happy to. But our services do really expand beyond that. And we're here to help you save time and provide advice even past what is within Navigator for drug labels. So an end-to-end, that solution to really be here to support with compliance, for your drug labels, as well as, we do have a medical device side. So if there's ever anything you think of that, you might be able to help with, so we'd always be happy to, discuss. So we're here to get it right and get it right the first time, as it says on the bottom there. And, if there's any additional questions, information needed, please feel free to send it our way or my way, and I'm always happy to answer those questions.
Okay, thank you, Julia. So we did have we intended to have some time for Q&A, but we are over the hour. So, thank you, Gary and Julia, for all that great information. Any questions that were asked via chat, we'll be sure to follow up with you individually via email. Any additional questions, please feel free to contact us. You see our email and our phone number right here on the screen. And again, as we mentioned in the beginning, within the next day or two, we will be sending out the slides and the recording. So please feel free to follow up with us, and we're happy to help in any way we can. Thank you, Gary and Julia, for a great presentation, and thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We look forward to our next webinar, which is actually next Tuesday on ECTD version 4.0. So if that's something that interests you, be sure to visit our website and register for that as well. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you, everybody.